Okay, friends, now we have a new page to look at to practice main topic and supporting details. So I'm going to read this new page, and while I do that, I want you to think, what is this page mostly about? As always, you can follow along with the little red pointer, if I can find out where it went. There we go. We're listening and thinking, what is this page mostly about? Now, when he wrote poems, he felt as free as the Passaic River as it rushed to the falls. Willie's notebook filled up one after another. My boy is a good writer, his mother said, and it was true. Unfortunately, no one paid much money for poetry, and Willie needed to earn a living. So let's look at this sentence by sentence. Let's start back at the beginning. Now, when he wrote poems, he felt as free as the Passaic River as it rushed to the falls. I'm going to stop right here at that period. Is this whole page, now that we've gotten a chance to read it, is this whole page about the river? No, we have one sentence about the river. Is it about his notebooks? Is it about Willie's notebooks? I see his notebooks in the illustration, but this is the only sentence about his notebooks, so the whole thing can't be about his notebooks. My boy is a good writer, his mother said, and it was true. Is the page about his mom? His mom knows that he's a good writer, but the page is not about his mom. And reading our last sentence, we see that we learn that nobody pays a lot of money for poetry to earn a living. And we talked on the first day about how earning a living is the money that you get for your job, because the money you get from your job is what you use to pay for the things that you need to live, like food or your house. So is this about Willie earning a living? No. What is this whole page mostly about? I think this whole page, I see something repeated over and over. I see the word poems. I see that he is a good writer. And I see the word poetry again. So something about poems and poetry and a writer. The person who is a writer is Willie. And he is writing poems. So that tells me, because I see these details all over repeated on the page, that the whole page, the main topic, is how Willie writes a lot of poems. So now we want to look for supporting details. How do we know that this page is about how Willie likes to write poems? What do we see? What can we read just from looking at the first paragraph? What detail in that first paragraph tells us that Willie likes to write a lot of poems? If we look at the illustration again, we see pages and pages of his notebook. In the first paragraph, we can also find a sentence that says, Willie's notebooks fill up one after another. Does that support the main topic that he writes a lot of poems if his notebook fills up one after another? Yes. So our first supporting detail that shows the main topic, our first detail that shows that Willie writes a lot of poems is that his notebooks fill up one after another. We know this is an important detail because we see it in the illustration, and he's writing so many poems that his notebooks are filling up. So now let's look at another supporting detail. What other supporting details do we see on this page that support the main topic that Willie writes a lot of poems? We have another clue in that first paragraph. If we look up here again, we already know that his notebooks fill up one after another, but what other detail in this first paragraph tells me that Willie likes to write a lot of poems? How does he feel? We see that Willie felt as free as the Passaic River as it rushed to the falls. When we think back to the river, we know that Willie was soothed, he was calmed, he was relaxed, he enjoyed going to the river. So if he felt as free as the river, would this be a good thing or would this be a bad thing? This would be a good thing because we know Willie likes the river. We also know, thinking about the title, A River of Words, that if he feels like he's making his own river of words by writing poems, this is super important. This is what the story is all about. And this detail from the first paragraph shows that he writes a lot of poems because he feels as free as the river of words while he's writing. So the next detail that we see on our chart is that he feels as free as the Passaic River because it tells us that he felt that way when he wrote his poems. When he wrote his poems, he felt free. And we know that Willie liked poetry, and we know that he liked the river. So this detail shows that Willie writes a lot of poems. Let's look at one more supporting detail. Start thinking about this second paragraph and what details in this second paragraph show the main topic that Willie writes a lot of poems. Let's read this second paragraph one more time. "My boy is a good writer," his mother said, and it was true. Unfortunately, no one paid much money for poetry, and Willie needed to earn a living. We've already spent some time talking about what it means to earn a living, and we know that Willie needs to earn one. But is that what this page is mostly about? Is this page about how Willie needs to earn a living? If we're not sure, let's check again at our main topic. We already know the main topic is how Willie writes a lot of poems. But if he's trying to earn a living, does that tell me that he writes a lot of poems? No. So let's try again. Let's read this second paragraph one more time and think, what information tells me that Willie writes a lot of poems? What detail supports the main topic? "My boy is a good writer," his mother said, and it was true. Unfortunately, no one paid much money for poetry, and Willie needed to earn a living. I'm going to highlight what his mom said. His mom said, "My boy is a good writer." How do you become good at something? Do you just do it one time, or do you do it over and over and over? If you become good at something, do you do it a little bit or a lot? You do it a lot. And what do we know that Willie is doing a lot of? We know he's writing a lot of poems. So if he's a good writer, does this show that he's writing a lot of poems? Yes, he's a good writer because he's practicing, because he's writing so many poems. That is how you become good at something, is to practice a lot. So if his mom is saying he's a good writer, that supports the idea that he writes a lot of poems because it tells us how he became a good writer. So if we look at our supporting detail down here in our chart, his mom says he is a good writer. That shows that Willie writes a lot of poems, and he's a good writer because he writes a lot of poems. So if I erase my drawings, let's think about this chart all together now. After we read the whole page again, we figured out that it was mostly about how Willie writes a lot of poems. We decided after reading 2 paragraphs and thinking about what details repeat over and over, that the page was mostly about, the main topic was about how Willie writes a lot of poems. We were able to prove that by then looking for details, and we found 3 details that show that Willie writes a lot of poems from this page. His notebooks fill up one after another. That shows he writes a lot of poems. So we have our main topic supported by that first detail. The next detail we found was that he feels as free as the Passaic River. This detail shows the main topic because it tells us how Willie feels. And we know that Willie likes the river, and that the river is like a river of words when he writes. And he writes a lot. And so feeling as free as the Passaic River shows that Willie writes a lot of poems because the river is like a river of words. And the last detail, we know that his mom thinks he's a good writer because he writes so much. He writes a lot of poems, and this is what makes him a good writer, is he writes so many that he becomes good at it after practice. Take some time to click pause on this video and think again. Read the page to yourself and think, how did we find the main topic, and how did we find those supporting details?